Hey, this is Johnny Holes, and you're listening to Out of Character, episode 8. Is it episode 8 already? Or is it episode? Yeah, it's episode 8. Wow. Wow. Well, is it episode 8? I've re-recorded this a number of times, actually. This has been a really difficult thing to talk about because every time I get into it, I always find myself kind of backing out of it and then re-recording it again and then stopping and then so I think this is maybe the sixth or seventh take in the I don't know 2 or 3 days. I think the last episode aired 4 days ago or something. I'm not sure. I don't remember. But it's not easy talking about. There's some things that are kind of hard to talk about, but I guess this is a form of free therapy, even though there's really nobody on the other end responding, if that makes any sense. But I appreciate everyone listening. It means a lot to me, and you know, I really do. I mean, it's kind of I kind of live alone and stuff. Kind of, but don't not kind of. It's just me and the cat. I think I've said that before. And I don't. I'm not giving like a pity party or anything. It's been it's kind of weird sometimes, because you don't have anybody to talk to, and the cat doesn't respond. I mean, I do have friends here where I live, but you can only bother them so much, and I don't want to overstay my welcome, so to speak, because it's like, how much can you possibly bother? It's just I don't want to be that guy, so I just kind of just keep to myself and just keep it quiet, and you know, sometimes your thoughts just kind of get the best of you, and in my case, I just am constantly overthinking and overanalyzing. I mean, if there was a way to lose weight just by thinking, I would be really skinny. But unfortunately, I'm not. So that sucks. But um, all in is, it's just, I don't know what it is. It is what it is, or whatever. Making sense. But I can say that I remember it like it was yesterday. It was July 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th, 1982. I was 9 years old, and my parents were going on vacation with our neighbors, and my sister was going to be staying at my grandparents' house, and I was going to be staying at my den mother's house, basically with her son. Her son, I think, was 2 years older than I was. And that was a weird year for me in general because it was also my first Cub Scout camporee where they decided to make a skit out of a ghost story. And of course, me being the naive, gullible 9 year old, I thought that the ghost story was actually happening. I thought everything was real. So I ran into the middle of the woods, like, I don't know, whatever the heck time it was at night. And my dad and a bunch of other counselors had to come out and find me because here I am screaming, thinking that there's these girls running around with bloody hands. Um, they have this area of the Boy Scouts that isn't well known. It's called Explorer Scouts, and Explorer Scouts are basically like a unisex version of Boy Scouts, except there's a theme behind what they do. So, for example, there would be a Civil War um, group, which actually was the one that I was involved with when I was in my teens. And or a movie group or whatever. They'd all stick to one theme and they'd focus on that. So I don't remember what this particular explorer group did, but I just remember it scared the living shit out of me, and I was terrified to be away from home or to be away from my parents for many years when I was a kid. Um, and the irony is, it's many years later, and I'm so used to being alone that I sometimes get uncomfortable when I'm not. It's very strange. It doesn't make any sense. Freud would have a fucking field day with me. But anyway, back to the story, as it were. So my mom decides, you're gonna stay with your friend, and I thought, hey, great. I was excited, but I was also secretly terrified. And I didn't tell I didn't want my parents to know how scared I was because, I was trying to be like growing up or big boy or whatever the hell you want to call me, other than asshole. I was just, I was a 9-year old kid. So my mom, my parents dropped me off, and I remember sitting in the living room, and this was July, summertime in New York. And summertime in New York, it's very hot out. But for some reason, my den mother's house always smelled like a fireplace. It always smelled like the fireplace was burning, which even as a kid, I thought it was confusing during the winter time. I mean, I'm sorry, during the summertime, because it's so hot in the summer, you don't want to have a fireplace on. It used to confuse me. But I remember sitting in the living room with that smell of the fireplace, and my den mother was doing something, I think, in the kitchen. And I remember the way, this is kind of important to note, the way their house was designed. It was, the kitchen was all the way in the back. Next to the kitchen was the hallway leading to her son's room. Then you move forward, there's the next to the kitchen was the dining room. Next to the dining room was a living room. And in front of the living room was like a den area that sort of overlooked the street. Um, the house was really oddly designed. I remember. I can't believe how vividly I remember all this. So I'm sitting in there, and she's doing whatever she's doing in the kitchen, and I turn to her and I say, "Hey, do you notice something?" And she says, "What?" I said, "Well, I'm not crying. I'm not scared." She said, "Well, you shouldn't be scared. You're gonna have a great week. We're gonna go to the zoo. We're gonna go to the movies. You're gonna do this and that. We're gonna have a great time. I'm gonna make your favorite food and all this stuff. We're gonna have a great time." In all honesty, I wanted to throw up. I was just petrified. I didn't try to keep my cool as best as I could. It was maybe, I think, that evening. Maybe it was the next day. I'm not sure. I remember not sleeping, and I remember looking outside my friend's window, and there was a street light. I can't believe I remember these details. This was 1982, so this was over 30 years ago, and I remember these details. I can't believe how vividly I remember this, but I remember just looking out the window, and my friend used to keep um his room really dark, and I needed that light, because I was scared, but he didn't. He shut the ball. It was just, the whole thing was just really weird. But anyway, it was that night, and it was probably like 9:30, maybe 10 o'clock, and we're watching the movie Deliverance with Burt Reynolds from 1971. If anybody's a film buff, the John Borman movie, the infamous movie where Ned Beatty is running up a tree and proceeds to get raped That wonderful movie. Showing this to a 9-year-old. That scene is about to come on. I see Ned Beatty about to climb a tree, and somebody's pulling his pants down, and immediately his mother turns to us and goes, "Hey, why don't you guys go outside and get some ice cream? Because just out of coincidence, the Mr. Softy truck drove by." For those of you who don't know what Mr. Softy is a ice cream truck, usually found in urban areas, in New York City, and I think I'm not. I think it's only New England. I'm not 100% sure, but it's an ice cream truck. Basically, it's usually locally owned by someone. So I even remember what she wanted. She said, "Why don't you go outside and you guys get yourself some ice cream and get me a black cat," which was the name of the ice cream, ironically enough. So we walk past the den, and I look through the window and I see that scene, and I'm obviously confused because I don't know what's going on. I'm 9, and we get the ice cream. We come back in, and instead of going back into the den, I decided to sit in the living room and wait for my parents to call because I wanted to just talk to my mom. I was scared. Now the butterflies are starting to control them. They're starting to take over. Phone rings, and I jump and I leap to the phone, and I think I even might have went to go answer it myself. I was like sitting right next to it, and she kind of stopped me. So I get on the phone, and I start, after she speaks to my mom, and I start talking to my mom for a little while, and I'm crying and I'm a little upset, and I'm really, really, really terrified. But my mom's like, don't worry about it. You're gonna have a good time. Same spiel. So I hang up the phone with my mom, go into the kitchen. Mrs. I can't say her name. Mrs. H follows me into the kitchen, and she goes, "Look, once again, she repeats everything that she said the day before. We're gonna have a great time. We're gonna have your favorite food. We're gonna go to the zoo tomorrow. We're gonna do this. We're gonna do that. Blah 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 blah." Great. Next day comes along, and it's raining, pouring, and my friend and I walk to this place on Northern Boulevard in Flushing called Mike's Comic Hut. Mike's Comic Hut. Mike's Comic Hut was the place that if you were between the ages of 9 and I guess, I don't know, 14, maybe a little older, that's where you wanted to go. Mike's Comic Hut. Comic books, Dungeons and Dragons, movie magazines. Mike's Comic Hut introduced me to Fangoria magazine. Um, awesome place. So I remember we walked home and we got soaking wet. We were drenched on the way home. And that was like the only, I think, fun I had and then that short period of time that I ended up staying with them. But I got home, we dried off. I don't know, maybe we take a shower or something. I don't remember what it was. And then the phone rings again. And now I'm starting to get upset. Now I'm scared. I'm not sleeping at all again. And it's the next day, or it's the same day. I don't remember because I think I was there for maybe 3 days or something. I don't remember. And now I'm on the phone with my father. Now this is one of those old school telephones with a rotary dial and a really long extension cord. So as I'm on the phone with my dad, I start to cry and I get scared. And Mrs. H puts her finger on the receiver. Click. She goes, "Every time you cry, I'm going to make it so you can't talk to your father. So stop crying, or else you're not going to talk to him anymore." Click. And my father continues to talk to me, and I start to cry. Click. And I think this might have happened maybe a couple more times. It didn't until finally we just got disconnected. We got disconnected at a pivotal moment in the conversation because my dad was starting to calm me down a little bit and was telling me the story about, when he was and went to Kinderhook Lake, and his he was scared, and he was doing the thing that your parents do when you're scared. So we get disconnected. I drop the phone to the ground on in the kitchen, and now I'm standing between the hallway and the kitchen, and I'm leaning up against the in between the doorway, I guess. And she slaps me across the head really, really hard, and I almost pass out. I'd never been hit that hard in my entire life. My dad never even hit me that hard. I mean, my dad wasn't, we disciplined me and my sister the way kids get disciplined. It wasn't like whatever, but this woman really slapped the shit out of me. She dragged me into her son's room and shut the door. Oh no! And then first she said, "You're not going to ruin this for your parents like you ruin everything else." She went on to call me a brat. I'm a spoiled kid. I'm, everything you're not supposed to tell a 9-year-old. She basically just said, you know, she threw the kitchen sink at me pretty much. So now I'm terrified. Nothing's changed. Now I just want to go home until finally I managed to get my grandfather on the phone, and my grandfather ends up picking me up, and I end up staying with my grandparents and my sister for the next few days until my parents get back. Now the thing is, I didn't tell my mom or my dad about this until I was 16. So for about 7 years, I basically just didn't say anything. I kept it to myself, and for some reason, I always kind of assumed or also always thought that they knew what had happened, but my parents never knew until I remember talking with my friends when I was in high school. We were having, like, what you usually do when you're in high school is, you discuss how horrible your life is. When in essence, it's really not that bad at all. But you know, and I was just telling about this, and I didn't even know it was a form of abuse when I was a kid. I just thought I was being a bad kid and I deserved to get hit. When all I really was scared because I didn't want to, be away from my parents, and I was a 9-year-old. So it was kind of like that age where I was supposed to grow up too fast. I don't know what it was, but by the time my parents found out about it, I was too young. I mean, Mrs. H and the family had moved out of state. I think they moved to Maryland or something. I don't remember. And it was just, too late to, I don't think my parents would. I don't know. I do remember that. I mean, I don't really know what they would have done anyway, but I do remember because she was my den mother. I would get dropped off at her house every Thursday at 4:30 in the afternoon, and I was petrified after school. I was petrified to go to her house because I was always the first one there. Because when you're in a den, you're not allowed to really have your mom isn't supposed to be your den mother. So my mother wasn't. And she was. The other kids would go to my mom. And I just remember just being petrified and always wanting to throw up. That year, I was going into the fourth grade after that summer, and I was petrified to go to school. I would literally throw up every single morning. My mom would have to physically drag me to school. My school was maybe a block and a half away from where I lived, and I was petrified. Once again, just petrified to be away from home, petrified to be away from my parents, and because of this woman, basically, because I wasn't allowed to be a 9-year old. When I think about that, I that moment really, really screwed me up for a very long period of time. I still haven't fully recovered from it, but obviously I'm an adult now and whatever. I've become more of a loner than anything else, but I do remember that moment vividly. And it's, you know, you don't forget abuse. Nobody does. Um, if you are or have been abused, just know that you are forgiven, um, because it's not your fault. You weren't the person. You were the one being abused. You're the innocent. You're the victim. It's not your fault. Never was. Never will be. Don't let anybody blame you ever if you're a victim. Don't ever, ever, or don't ever blame yourself. It's one thing that drives me absolutely bananas is when I see some of these, when I see men abuse their wives, or I hear stories of them abusing their girlfriends and all this other stuff. And I don't want to sound like one of those macho assholes because I can't stand people like that. But I have no tolerance for that. I don't. And how can, first of all, how could you hit a woman that just don't get that at all? And secondly, just the idea of hurting another human being physically, just don't get it. Um, and it fucks you up. I know that a lot of maybe reverse psychology, it makes other people different. I don't know. In my case, it made me a coward. It made me live by fear. Um, I mean, I was terrified of just about everything for years. Afraid to go to school, afraid to, do. Just imagine everything you're supposed to do when you're a kid. I was petrified of, and I know it sounds silly and it sounds crazy, but it's true. And to a certain degree, my grandparents didn't officially believe the entire story. They thought it was, they thought I was making it up. They thought it was crazy or whatever. But it's all true. It all actually happened. And I know I'm 45 years old now. You know, I'm recording this episode on August 31st, 2018. And I'm 45 years of age, and I still remember those 4 days, or 5 days, or whatever the heck it was, like it was yesterday. I still get blown away that I remember the dates too. That's another thing that always still freaks me out. I mean, I might have been there for maybe 2 days, but it felt like, head kind of likes to gamble with time. But I bring that up just because it's a part of uh, how I was. It developed, how it messed with my psyche for the years to come, well into adulthood. And if anyone out there is listening, and if you, once again, if you are abused, please do something. Just don't be afraid to speak up and say something. If you have to say something outside, if you got to go to the authorities, by all means, go and do it, please. Don't let anyone stop you from using your voice. Don't use your fists, use your voice. It's a hell of a lot much more safer weapon. And you accomplish a heck of a lot more with your voice than you do your fists, trust me. And when you have to speak, make sure you speak at a tone where you don't have to scream. Of course, well, I shouldn't really say it that way. I mean, if you need to defend yourself and you need to get the hell out of there, by all means, do what you have to do. But don't, I'm getting, you know what? I'm digging myself into a grave right now. speak up. That's what I'm saying. Okay, just speak up. That's actually the point of this episode, is to just, when it wheels down to it, just use your voice. Don't hide. Don't be afraid to say what you have to say. Don't hurt anybody physically. Don't go out there and do anything stupid. Just use your voice. Because your voice is a very powerful weapon. I really hope that, I'm sort of getting the message across that I'm trying to get, and I'm not digging a hole even farther for myself. As always, thank you very much for listening. Like and subscribe, and do me a favor, drop a comment. I don't care if it's, say what you want. If you got something negative to say, that's totally fine. I could take constructive criticism. If you got something positive to say, even better. We all like to be, nurtured or whatever. Whatever you want to say, that's awesome. I need your opinions. I want to know how well, if this is going well or not. If it's, I want to know how the show is doing, and if there's any suggestions that anyone out there might have for a topic of show, just let me know, because I'm almost an open book, pretty much. Almost. I used to be more further open than usual, but if you want to know some things, just ask. Or if you think this a show idea might be a good topic for a show, just bring it up. Like I said, like and subscribe, leave some comments, the whole spiel, whatever it is. And once again, ladies, gentlemen, boys, men, girls, women, everyone out there who is listening, animals, pets, fish, if fish can hear, thank you very much, a million times over, for listening. I don't want to make these episodes too long. I just want to keep them, because they can be a little heavy, and it can be difficult to even talk sometimes like this. It could be very difficult, and very heart wrenching, because I'm digging up into very dark personal territory. But nevertheless, once again, thanks again for listening, and I will catch you all on the flip side. This is Johnny Holes, this character, and I'll talk to you guys next episode. Thanks again. Have a good one. Rock on.